Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to episode number 3 of the B2B website series here on B2B Growth. My name is Eric Sharp, and in this episode, I'm going to be speaking to those of you that are about to engage a website revamp, or you're currently in the middle of one. If you've just launched your new website, maybe bounce over to the previous 2 episodes if you haven't listened already. I think you'll find those helpful. For the rest of you that aren't interested in revamping your website, but know that it's coming someday, which it is coming at some point. It may not be this year or next year or in a couple of years, but at some point, you will probably have to address it. I still think you'll have some solid takeaways. The idea behind this particular episode is how to prevent your website redesign from absolutely blowing your budget. I've kind of come up with 9 different ways that your website budget can be blown. And I've tried to categorize them into 3 different buckets. If you listen to episode number 1, where I talk about common website mistakes, I kind of took a similar approach where I tried to group these takeaways into buckets, and I'm going to try to do the same thing here. So there are plenty of ways that your website could blow your budget. It comes with lots of unknowns. There are bountiful opportunities to blow your budget of not only dollars and cents, but of precious time and energy. Exceeding a budget, really with anything in your marketing, can be surprising, it can be frustrating, and at times even crippling. Here are 9 ways that your website could blow your budget, and I've broken them down into 3 categories, like I mentioned. Not enough, unplanned, and too many, okay? Those are the 3 types of ways that your budget can blow it. So let's get into the not enough bucket and start with not enough documentation. Nothing slows down the process of redesigning a website faster than playing the old, we talked about this game. How many times have you been part of a website revamp process where you're staring at your colleague and you're trying to enforce a specific feature or a piece of content, and you look at them and you say, but we talked about this. This whole process of not enough documentation is an absolute killer. So it only takes planning a single website with inadequate documentation to really scare you for life. That's kind of been my experience. And so having enough documentation allows you to reference details quickly and improve recall on your strategy, specs, and then all those micro decisions along the way. Not enough documentation, that is number 1. It will kill a website redesign really, really fast and slow down the whole process. Number 2 in the not enough bucket is not enough done is better than perfect decisions. I absolutely love this mantra. It's actually in our conference room in a poster that I love it so much. I invested in putting it up on the wall so I could stare at it every day. But perfection is such a dangerous approach when it comes to approving the major critical elements of a website redesign. So that would be either a sitemap or a wireframe or a prototype or a design mockup, even content. You could, if you wanted to, tweak every single page of copy for months and hold up releasing your entire website. I have seen that happen. More often than not, a done is better than perfect approach will keep your website's budget in check. The third not enough is not enough testing. Goodness, we highlighted this in episode number 1 with the common mistakes. This is something that will definitely break your budget because you're going to have your team just spinning their wheels, finding stuff randomly and saying things like, well, why isn't our services page styled properly on the Mac, or our navigation bar doesn't drop down in Internet Explorer. So what's the point, Eric? What are you trying to say here? The point, your big takeaway is that the continual discovery of browser issues because you didn't test enough will just put you in this sort of spinning wheel of death where you're going to be continuing to find stuff and fix it and find stuff and fix it and find stuff and fix it. And it's going to elongate the process. It's going to burn your budget. So you need to do this browser testing. If you have a quality developer, this is probably not an issue, but you need to enforce testing and you need to make sure you make the time for it. And that is the end of the not enough bucket. Again, that's not enough documentation, not enough done is better than perfect decisions, and not enough testing. So let's get into the second bucket, unplanned. And let's start with unplanned features and specifications. Would you start the construction on a home without planning the number of bedrooms it'll have first, right? Doesn't that sound crazy? Of course not. Unfortunately, many websites start development before even a solid prototype is completed, and it faces rework expenses. So a prototype is going to give you sort of the bones, the framework to understand the features and the specs of your website. Those need to be all fleshed out in prototype or wireframe mode and approved by people within your organization before you move into designer development. So what happens is, if you don't do that and you just focus on the aesthetics and you get the approval of the aesthetics and you actually start development on that, and it's a really light site that doesn't really solve any of your marketing problems, you are going to have to rework development. You're going to have to rework design, and that gets really, really expensive. Unplanned features and specifications is a big one. The fifth of the unplanned is unplanned third-party integrations. Do you know what systems your website will integrate with? A CRM, marketing automation platform, an email marketing service. Third-party solutions can really be viewed as plug and play, but it's never that easy, especially if there's a complex API integration that needs to happen. So API stands for Application Programming Interface. It's how applications essentially talk to each other. So a third-party application talking to your website to either pass data back and forth. If you don't set the foundation for this early on and say, you know what, we are going to integrate with Salesforce, and we can start planning for that and figure out what we need to do in the planning phase. You don't want to have this to be a surprise in your development or about ready to launch. You're clicking through your site and you're looking at a form and you're saying, oh, this form, the data from this form needs to be sent to Salesforce. And then that becomes a surprise to everyone. Unplanned third-party integrations will definitely suck everyone's time and suck your budgets. The sixth piece of the unplanned is unplanned communication overhead. Building a smart and results-driven website takes a hearty amount of communication, right? So I'm not saying that don't worry about communication. I just mean that the amount of communication needed to start and push forward and finish a website can be startling in retrospect. So if you're thinking, let's engage a website redesign, we'll just let one or two people spearhead it, and I don't want to be involved. So, maybe you're the CEO or a product specialist or someone within sales. The people that are spearheading your website are going to need your input. And a lot of times, again, that can be startling where the people that are spearheading the website redesign are asking to talk to a lot of these key people and get their input. So again, this unplanned communication overhead, a lot of times what I see is after the completion of a website, I've heard here and there, wow, we did not think that we needed to have that many conversations or make that many decisions. You need to sit down at the very beginning of the project and make sure you know the people that you're involving and how much time approximately you're going to need from them on a week-to-week basis. So that is the three elements of the unplanned category. Again, just for review, it's unplanned features and specifications, unplanned third-party integrations, and then unplanned communication overhead. The third bucket in how your website could completely blow your budget is too many. So the first one we'll dig into is too many content revisions. The key to preventing content revisions from blowing your budget is to understand its significance early so it doesn't add unplanned hours towards the end. I've witnessed companies treat content as an afterthought in the beginning, and then as you get into that mission critical mode where you're trying to get the website out the door and they actually start looking at the words that they're saying and realize, oh my goodness, we cannot launch this website without editing this content. This content is 5 years old, or it doesn't represent our product or our service in an accurate way anymore. Bob in accounting wrote it, 8 years ago. We definitely need to refresh that. I think the key to all this is preventing too many content revisions is put an emphasis on content from the very beginning. Gosh, we could spend a whole episode on talking about why the actual words on your website matter, how important that is. If you don't put that emphasis early in the process, you're going to start adding a bunch of content revisions toward the end of the project that's just going to keep punting your launch further and further and further out. The key takeaway here is to talk about content early in the process. Number 8 of the too many is too many design tweaks. So this is a common budget busting issue. If the design phase is not properly navigated, which again falls squarely on the shoulders of maybe the website company that is spearheading it or your internal team, if that design phase is not executed properly, it is going to elongate your project timeline and potentially create a lot of undesirable anxiety and confusion. All of us as human beings have an opinion when it comes to design. Process can be a very slippery slope, but there are certain artifacts and certain processes that you can do in the design phase to make sure that you're not just modifying major design elements right before you launch. I actually have an idea for a future episode to talk through how an organization should approach the visual design phase. Again, the aesthetics, the existing branding guideline, and how that's articulated in the site. I have some really good activities like mood boards and exercise called the Design Gut Check. Definitely be on the lookout for that future episode. I know I may be hitting a nerve here for some of you, but for this particular episode, here's the key takeaway. The tweaks and the modifications over and over and over again to essentially appease all the stakeholders. You will spin your wheels so far and so long if you haven't kind of gotten everybody on board with the visual design direction early on in the project. So again, too many design tweaks will definitely blow your budget. All right, so that leads us to the very last one, number 9 on my list. And this is part of the too many bucket. And this is too many people involved. I would recommend shooting for a small and qualified committee of people, probably 3 to 5 people that are going to be the ones that are reviewing major deliverables and approving major deliverables. That doesn't mean that you can't involve more than 3 to 5 people. That just means that the people that are responsible for moving your website redesign process along, try to keep that team small. This is definitely one of those things, too many cooks in the kitchen. If you involve 10, 15, 20 people in the visual design phase, like we just got done talking about, it is going to really, really blow your budget. You are going to rack up a lot of hours and a lot of people's time giving their input. And this never ends in success. Of the 20 years that I've been doing this, the smaller that the team is, the better the results have been and the likelier that they are going to launch their website in when they say they're going to launch their website. Many companies don't get this right. They think you just add more people. More is not better when making critical decisions. Too many opinions, too few decisions, too many people involved will definitely blow your budget. So there you have it. Those are the 9 ways your website could blow your budget. Again, there's not enough, there's unplanned, and there's too many. Let me just go through that really, really quickly for you. Not enough documentation, not enough done is better than perfect decisions, not enough testing, and then unplanned features and specs, unplanned third-party integrations, unplanned communication overhead. And then the last bucket, too many content revisions, too many design tweaks, and too many people involved. I know this process, either you're in the middle of right now or you're about ready to engage into. There's a lot of opportunity here to get this wrong. So if you can avoid those things, try to keep the project on track. Know your unknowns, ask questions, understand how the process is going to work from start to finish. This will protect your budget of money and time and of energy. That is the end of episode number 3. Thanks again for joining. Look forward to future episodes, and we'll talk to you next time.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big 3, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.